welcome to War Horses, the only college equestrian podcast endorsed by me, All-American jumping seat rider Taylor St. Jacques. Now here's your host, Auburn Elvis.
Hello and welcome to War Horses, the only college equestrian podcast that goes to swanky equestrian parties and is willing to tell you about it. I'm your host, Auburn Elvis. Let's talk about some college equestrian. So, yes, I went to a fancy party on Friday night. It was an equestrian party. Now, this is something that a lot of schools do. They get donors, sponsors, alumni, coaches, parents, and just all kinds of people. Get them together, and they talk about just the cool stuff they've done or the stuff they're going to do, and they thank everybody for giving lots of money, and then people drink and they eat food and just talk to one another. So Auburn did that. I'm sure if you're a fan of another school, they probably do that too. So it was real fun. Did that on Friday night. It was homecoming weekend at Auburn, so I went back for various things and went to that. Got to see a lot of people that I knew, meet some people that I didn't know, saw some former riders, talked to parents of existing riders, and just had a real good time. It was fun. If you ever get a chance to go to one of those, you should do it. They got drinks, they got food. I mean, it's fun. Talked to some parents. It was really cool. Talked to, Victoria Zimber. Her mom was there. Her dad and brother were not there because I think they were running a half or doing a half triathlon or something the next day, so they weren't there. But talked to her mom. And what was really cool is my wife and I had been talking to the parents of Anna Marie Mays, and she was telling us some stories about when they moved them in, and it was funny because she was telling us one side of the story, and then the lady, Mrs. Zimber was across over there, and she heard the story that we were telling, and she knew from the other side from her daughter having told her, and so it was really, and then she came, oh, well, I'm the mom of blah, 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 blah. That's my Mrs. Zimber impression. So yeah, it was cool, stuff like that. It's cool, it's fun, you meet people, you should go to those. I will say that I met Lily, Betty's parents, her dad, and they weren't impressed by me. So Lily, if you're listening, they didn't seem like they got it, what was up. They didn't know me. So if you could just kind of, be slick about it. Don't just say, oh, I heard Auburn Elvis said you didn't know him. But, just something like, oh, you were at the thing. Was Auburn Elvis there? And then they'll probably go, well, there was this guy in Elvis costume. But, and then you can be like, oh, well, let me tell you what that's all about. And tell them I'm kind of a big deal and all that. Just kind of, educate your parents. All that was fun. It was neat to go through the facility, and you get a little swag gift, and you get to pose with some of the horses, and it was neat. So yeah, the weather was nice, cool, and like I said, free drinks and food. Well, free in that you've paid lots and lots of money in donations to get that food. But anyway, fun time. Go do it if you can. So now let's talk about some actual equestrian action that happened. The first meet we want to talk about is number 7 Baylor at UT Martin. Now, Baylor is number 7 in my rankings, the official Auburn Elvis rankings. I'm not really sure what they are in the other rankings, but they're number 7. So they're going to go over to UT Martin. UT Martin, not a traditional power. So again, we kind of figured Baylor would win this one, and they did. But it was actually, a little closer than you would expect. The way this thing kind of worked out is, when I see the rosters or the matchups of the lineups, I go through and I do little predictions of, oh, I think this girl's going to get the point here, or I think that rider's going to get the point there. If they're really close in terms of how they've been performing, I generally will just take the easy way out and say, okay, that's a toss-up. So the way this worked out, at least in the predictions, over in the jumping seat, I favored Baylor in 4 of those. Again, there's 10 of each of these. So Baylor was favored in 4. I favored UT Martin in about 3 of the rides. And then there were 3 that were just toss-ups where it was too close to call. So the way the action went down, each team got an upset of the other, what I would consider an upset of who was favored. And then Baylor took 2 of those 3 toss-ups. So the jumping seat ended 6-4, where Baylor had the 6 and then UT Martin had 4. It's pretty much what was expected based on those lineups. Just overall, I would have expected Baylor to get, maybe one more point from the Skyhawks, but a lot of it is depending on just the random draw of who gets matched up against whom. And so this worked out pretty much as expected in terms of overall points. Now, over in the Western events, I had Baylor favored in 5 of those head-to-heads. I had UT Martin favored in 2, and then there were 3 toss-ups. Now, Baylor got upset in 2 of their reigning matchups, but they upset the Skyhawks in 1 of the reigning matchups, and then there was a no-point tie in that other one, and the Skyhawks were actually favored in that one. So all 3 of the toss-ups went Baylor's way in this, and I'm sort of rambling here. Hold on, let me look at my notes. Okay, so basically, there was a few upsets, but Baylor overall got the better of things in reigning. Now, when you look over at horsemanship, what happened? It kind of went as expected, according to my notes, which aren't very complete, apparently. But anyway, Western went 7-2 in favor of Baylor, and overall, it was 13-6. That's the important thing, okay? It was 13-6 overall. Both teams, I think, have things that they can take away have positive things they can take away from this meet. I think UT Martin rode really well on the jumping seat side, which might be a little surprising. And Baylor really shone on the Western ride, so they can certainly take that away as a positive. So now let's look at another big meet that happened this weekend. Number 2, Texas A&M at South Dakota State. And again, they're number 2 in the Auburn Elvis rankings, but spoiler alert, they're probably not going to be number 2 for very long. Because this one was a lot closer than I think it was expected to be. And that's no shade thrown at South Dakota State. It's just that Texas A&M returned a lot of talent. And when I say that, I want to be very descriptive about what I mean by that. Everybody returns a fair amount of talent. It's just that a lot of teams had that talent concentrated into fewer numbers of riders. The way Texas A&M's roster is looking this year, they have their talent spread across a larger number of girls on the lineup. So there's some positives to that and then some potential drawbacks to that, as we saw this weekend. What that tends to mean is, well, like, for example, let's say you had a team where you knew your number 1 and your number 2 rider, they were really good, they win like 80% of their rides or more. Okay, that's a ton of talent, and it's concentrated into 2 riders. So you're pretty sure you're going to get those 2 points, but then your next 3 riders, you might just be, taking whatever you can get. They might not be very good. Maybe they're winning about 25% of their rides, those other 3. So overall, you've got a certain amount of talent. Well, in Texas A&M's case, they might not have, 1 or 2 riders that are that consistent, but there's not as much drop-off on their number 3, their number 4, number 5, or even 6 or 7, because last year they really rotated through and they got a lot of girls some experience. And so part of the downside of that is that you got lots and lots of options to put into a roster or into a lineup that will only have 5 spots in an event. So there's that chance that if a girl goes up there and maybe it's not her day, she didn't have her best day, there might have been a girl sitting on the bench that if you'd have put her in instead, she could have gotten that point for you. So there could be a lot of second guessing, and I think there might be some second guessing given how the results went down in this meet. Let's get to the meet. Now, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go through here and just so we can analyze this one in particular, because overall, I'm just going to go ahead and spoil it and say I don't think Texas A&M's performance this weekend was worthy of what we would expect from a number 2 team in the nation. So we're going to analyze this, but I'm not interested in embarrassing anybody. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to tell you the names. I'm just going to say the situations in terms of, well, this rider tends to do about this well versus a rider who tends to do about that well, and that's why I favored this one or that one, and then here's how it actually, scored and went down. I did this back when Auburn lost to Baylor, because again, we're not trying to, point fingers at anybody. We're just trying to get an idea of how do these situations come about. So let's look at that. Now, what we had was in our first head-to-head here in fences, we had a rider for South Dakota State, and she had not ridden at all last year versus an Aggie rider who only rode like once or twice and lost every time. So, again, don't have a lot of data between these two, so I just took the easy way out and said toss-up. Well, that one went to the Jackrabbits. Okay, so in a toss-up, South Dakota State got that one. All right. Next one, we had a ride where we had a Jackrabbit rider. She wins about 20% of hers going up against an Aggie rider who wins about 15% of hers. Now, again, neither one of these girls are just out there killing it, so there's not an obvious winner, so I took the easy way out and said toss-up. Well, that one again went to the Jackrabbit. So, again, these two toss-ups, hey, South Dakota State got those. That's great if you're a South Dakota State fan. So next we look at this. We got a South Dakota State rider who had ridden a little bit, and she had gotten no wins last year. Going up against an Aggie rider who had ridden some and had about 15% of her wins. Now, I called this one for Aggies. I said, all right, this is going to be an advantage for Aggies because she's got a lot more experience. Doesn't have a lot of wins, but at least she's ridden a bunch. Well, this one also went to the Jackrabbits. You got an unexperienced, or a lesser experience with no wins, upsetting somebody on the Aggies. So again, we got, boom, these first 3 rides going to the Jackrabbits when, they were either toss-ups or favored for the other way. So then we get into some ones where we get a little bit more data that we can look at. We got a freshman rider from the Jackrabbits going up against an Aggie rider who wins over 50%. I favored Texas A&M on that, and they got the point. Next one, we got a Jackrabbit rider who wins about 20%, going up against somebody who wins about 75% of the time for the Aggies. So this is their top rider in the event. And I favored this one for the Aggies, and the Aggies did win that one. So, okay, that one, those last 2 went to form, but the first 3, gave the Jackrabbits some points when you're kind of like, maybe 1 or 2 of those should have gone the other way if things were really clicking for the Aggies, but they did not. So now let's look at the flat. We got a rider for the Jackrabbits who did no rides last year, going up against an Aggie rider who had won about a third, a little bit more actually, of her rides last year. I favored the Aggies in that, and they did get the point. All right. Woo! Next, we got a Jackrabbit rider who wins right at 50%, going up against an Aggie rider who wins pretty close to 100% of the time. This one was a big upset. It went to the Jackrabbits rider. In fact, she had the MOP. So maybe this was just a case where she just rode, lights out and upset the other girl who typically wins all the time. So, but this still is an upset. I mean, I think most people would have picked the Aggie rider to win in that situation, and she did not. So that was a point to the Jackrabbits. Next one, we got a matchup here where we got a girl who hadn't won any for the Jackrabbits going up against a girl who wins about 45% of the time for the Aggies. Pick the Aggies, they win that one. They did get that point. Next, we got a freshman, so we got no data on her for the Jackrabbits, going up against another girl who wins about 45% for the Aggies. I picked the Aggies. This one went to the Jackrabbits. So again, that's a little unusual, but didn't expect that, but it happens. It's just a lot of these are happening. That's not great. Next, last one in the flat, we've got a rider for the Jackrabbits who has won about 17%, going up against an Aggie rider who only had 1 or 2 rides, but she won them. So I gave this one to the Aggies because I felt like, you know what, she's got some experience and she wins. So, but this one went to the Jackrabbits as well. So when you look at this, I had the Aggies favored in 8 of these 10 points, and they only won 4 of those. I had 2 toss-ups. Jackrabbits won both of those. I had none of these that actually favored the Jackrabbits. So yeah, they ended up winning 6 of the points, and Texas A&M only got 4 of the jumping seat points. So I'm sure that's not as good as what Texas A&M is capable of, but hey, on this day, you had a lot of riders who, for whatever reason, were losing their points to the home team there. So that set the stage, and it kept this meet incredibly close. Then we had, the second to last event was horsemanship. I'll run through this one in the same sort of way. The Jackrabbits had a girl who's got about a 50% winning percentage going up against an Aggie girl who wins about 25% of the time. I gave this one, I favored the Jackrabbits, but the Aggies actually took that point. So here they're starting to kind of do the same thing in reverse, where they're getting points that, they weren't favored in. So the Aggies are coming back at this point. Then we've got an upperclassman with no experience going up against a freshman for the Aggies. And I took the easy way out on this and said, toss up, I have no clue. Well, this one went to the Jackrabbits. So a little bit of back and forth here. We got a Jackrabbit rider, 20% usually, and then she's going up against an Aggie rider who gets 63%, somewhere in that range. I favored the Aggies, and the Aggies did take that one. Next, we got a girl who hadn't won at all for South Dakota State, going up against a girl that for the Aggies who wins about a third of the time. I favored the Aggies. This one ended up being a no-point tie, so a little bit of a victory there for the Jackrabbits because they weren't predicted to win in that one. And then we've got a big ride here where we've got a girl for the Jackrabbits where she wins about a third, going up against an Aggie girl who wins almost 80% of the time. I favored the Aggies, as you would expect, and she did get it. So here we've got a rider in horsemanship. She delivered. So, but at this point, everything was tied, 7-7, going into the final event, which is reining. And frankly, it should, if you're buying into the hype that basically came from me last week, that A&M was really talented and, number 2 team in the country and all that, you don't expect the number 2 team in the country to be tied with an unranked foe going into the final event. So, but with the pressure on, the Aggies did deliver in the first ride here. There was a freshman going up against a girl who wins almost 60% of the time for A&M. A&M, I picked them, and they did get that point. We have a girl that didn't ride any last year for South Dakota State going up against an Aggie girl who wins about a third of her rides. I picked the Aggies. Jackrabbits pulled the upset there. So they're staying neck and neck. Now they're both tied 8-8. Now we've got a girl who for South Dakota State, she has won over 2/3 of her rides last year, going up against a junior who didn't ride at all last year for the Aggies. I picked the Jackrabbits in this, but the Aggies upset her. So this was a pivotal turning point right there. So then next we have a girl for the Jackrabbits who wins about a little over 2/3, going up against an Aggie rider who wins 3/4, so 75% of the time. This one was a toss-up. It was too close, so I took the easy way out and I said, I don't know who's going to win this. And the Aggies won it. So that right there kind of sealed the day, gave them enough points to win. And then there was one final ride where the Jackrabbits had a girl who hadn't won at all last year, going up against a girl who gets about 45% for A&M, picked A&M, and they get the point there. So that basically, they were able to kind of come from behind with the with the Western rides, and A&M was able to win the day. Ended up being 11-8, which is much closer than it should be, but it was good enough for a win. But I'm telling you, it's going to make me rethink and reposition some of the rankings. Texas A&M ain't going to be ranked number 2 in my rankings. Sorry. But, they'll be ranked. It just won't be that high. Because until they can go out and show better against some opponents, I'm not going to rank them like that. So, all right. So we've got a couple more meets. But what we'll do is we will take a break. Go hear a commercial, hear Kyle talk about some stuff, and then we'll come back and I'll do those next couple of single discipline meets and let you know how those went.
Hey Auburn fans, I want to take a quick time out from this episode to bring your attention to something very special. Here at the E2C Network, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best content for Auburn fans out there. And best of all, it's free to you. But just because it's free doesn't mean there aren't costs, especially when you have a library of hundreds of podcasts, videos, blogs, and more. Many of you have reached out and asked how you can support this network in the past. Well, now I have your answer. It's called the E2C Network Booster Club over at patreon.com/E2C Network. There you'll find a membership monthly reward system where you can sign up for as little as $1 and get different perks at different tiers. Some of those perks include things such as apparel, eligibility to join us on future podcasts, recognition as an E2C Network booster, exclusive communications, and bonus content that is available nowhere else. If you love this network and want to help us keep producing podcasts like this one, please head on over to patreon.com/E2C Network to join the E2C Network Booster Club. You can also get there by going to our website, e2cnetwork.com/support. Whether you decide to join or not, we are still so appreciative that you would support us by just listening and being here, because each and every one of you is part of our E2C Network family. Well, that's it. Timeout's over. Let's get back into the episode.
All right, we're back. Now, let's talk about some single discipline teams. Now, what we mean by single discipline is basically, you have the fancy English riding and then you have the Western riding where you look like cowgirls, but you ain't got lassos and stuff. All right. So there are a lot of teams that don't do the Western ridings, okay? Because you got to have more horses and you got to have more coaches, and it's a different style. So it's a whole different ball game. So we have a section of the NCEA that will allow teams to just compete in the fancy English riding or jumping seat. So there are a bunch of teams that just do that. And but they'll also compete against the other teams, but they'll only do obviously just the fancy English writing. So, but they'll also do the fancy English writing just amongst themselves because there's a separate national championship just for fancy English writing. So let's talk about those fancy English writing teams. 3 of them, SUNY New Paltz, Delaware State, and Sacred Heart University, all got together to do a tri-meet. So they each rode against the other one time. And let me tell you, here's how it went. On a Friday, you had SUNY New Paltz. They beat Delaware State 5-3. All right, so you're thinking, okay, SUNY New Paltz, they're better than Delaware State. Then you had Sacred Heart beating SUNY New Paltz by 5-3. And you're like, oh, okay, well, transitive property. You got SUNY New Paltz, they're better than Delaware State. And then you've got Sacred Heart, they're better than SUNY New Paltz. Oh, that's easy. And then you have that last meet, and in that one, Delaware State beat Sacred Heart, but they beat them 6-2 instead of 5-3. So now you have a circular argument where A is better than B is better than C, and C is better than A. So that does not compute, but it's going to make it a little bit tougher for me to figure out, well, how do I want to rank these? But I'll tell you, the team that got 6 points is my new favorite because they did not get 5. They didn't win 5-3. If they'd won 5-3, I'd be kind of upset at them. But 6-3 is much better, and I think I'm going to use that to bump Delaware State up a little bit amongst these other 2. So that's how that action went. And yeah, we'll see how the other rankings do on that, but they'll somehow put them all down at number 4 somehow. Anyway, so that's how that meet went. Looking ahead, let's see, I'm going to pause thing and look at my schedule. Okay, wait a minute. I was about to go on and do the schedule coming up for next week, but I've remembered that I forgot to talk to y'all about another meet. Bridgewater College, which is kind of new team here, they rode against Lynchburg, and that one was 5-3. So a lot of 5-3 meets coming up this past weekend. So, but Lynchburg did win, and so yeah, that one went 5-3 in favor of the Hornets. Now let's look at the schedule. So coming up on Thursday, we've got South Carolina. They're going all the way across country to UC Davis. So they're going to ride against the Aggies over there. I would expect South Carolina to probably win this one, but I'll be honest with you, Texas A&M's performance has got me questioning everything. So who knows how that's going to go. I think it'll be the Gamecocks, but that's why they ride the meet, so you know who's better. After that, the next day, South Carolina is going to go over to Fresno State and ride against them. But it won't just be Fresno State because TCU is also coming to town, and it's going to be a tri-meet separated over 2 days. So the Gamecocks will ride against the Bulldogs on Friday, and then on Saturday, the Gamecocks are going to ride against the Horned Frogs, and then the Horned Frogs are going to ride against the Bulldogs. So that's how it's all going to work out. Also happening on Friday, so I'm going back in time a little bit, UT Martin is heading up to Delaware State, so they are going to ride against them, and there's another tri-meet going on up there that's over 2 days again, and SMU is that other team coming to visit, so then on Saturday you're going to have SMU riding against UT Martin up in Delaware, and then you're going to have the Mustangs ride against Delaware State on Saturday night. So that's how that's going to go. Oh, wait, we also have a Sunday meet. TCU is going to ride against UC Davis. Oh, wow, so they're doing the exact reverse of what South Carolina did. So yeah, once TCU is done, then they're going to go to nearby Davis, and they're going to ride against the Aggies. So, okay, well, that's got a certain symmetry to it that I can certainly appreciate. As far as who's going to win, you know what? I would favor TCU to probably beat South Carolina and beat UC Davis. As far as the SMU one, I think SMU is going to beat both UT Martin and Delaware State. And I'm not sure how UT Martin and Delaware State will do. I think, the Skyhawks did really well this past weekend, so I'm going to go ahead and say that they're going to beat Delaware State. But again, the Aggies have me questioning everything, so I don't know who's going to win. But that's our quick look ahead at some of the action that's coming up this next week. And as always, I'll give you a little recap of how the action actually went, and so that way you can keep up to date on that. So that is, in general, that's our podcast. We don't have a lot of Auburn news to talk about. I did talk to some people, and they told me that one of the reasons that we haven't seen the Auburn spring schedule released yet is because there was another team that has also not released their spring schedule, and if you paid attention to the last episode, you know who that was. And at first, those two teams, Auburn and this other team, were going to be playing, but at the last minute it didn't work out. So Auburn is now scrambling to see if they can get another opponent lined up in the spring, and they should know pretty soon, and they will get that worked out. I think Auburn is also doing a not really publicized scrimmage or / exhibition against University of Sewanee's IHSA team coming up this weekend, just to kind of get Auburn ready for Georgia, which they have the following week. That is your update of the equestrian world. I am Auburn Elvis. Thank you very much for listening, and war horses.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on the E2C Network. On your way out, I want to remind you to stop by E2CNetwork.com. It's your one-stop shop for all our content across our podcast, YouTube channel, and much more. To stay up to date with us, make sure you're following social media accounts such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. While our content here may always be Auburn sports heavy, if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. War Eagle.